Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming to what's promising to be a very interesting and informative lecture. Our lecture today, first of all, I'd like to thank all the people that made this happen. I don't know all the people, but I know Professor Sepulitz and Dean Citron and the committee that brought Dr. Goldenberg here with us. And the lecture today, for the students, definitely was spearheaded by Melissa Grippa of JILSA and the rest of the JILSA staff, in conjunction with the Jewish Programs Committee with Professor Levine. So I'd want to thank everyone who had a hand in arranging this event today. As you might have seen from the poster, Dr. Goldenberg is going to speak today about the BDS movement, which stands for, when many people asked, Boycott, Divest, and Sanction Israel. This has an effect on all areas of life that affect Israelis, or if you follow the news, SodaStream, Matisyahu, and what's relevant to us here today in the law school is academic research. Dr. Goldenberg is starting an organization called I4, which is International Fellow Research, if I got that correctly, which is basically a group of academics which is promoting research which is for pro research throughout the world, which has seen has come up against and is feeling the pressures of the BDS movement. So just as a quick introduction, Dr. Goldenberg is the editor of the Netanya Law Review. Her area of expertise and her doctorate from Bar Ilan is in the area of cyber crime or cyber law, when she's a lecturer there, and in addition to this very important issue, which is dear to her heart. So without further ado, Dr. Goldenberg.
Shalom, everyone. Thank you for inviting me over to Touro College. I'd like to thank Rabbi Fogel for organizing this speech. I'd like to thank the Jewish Law Students Association and Melissa. Melissa, where are you? Hi, thanks. I'd like to thank Professor Roger Citron for thinking about this idea, and the Jewish Law Institute. I'd like to begin my talk today with a personal story. This story explains why I'm standing here instead of sitting in my office and writing a paper about a legal subject. Several months ago, I wrote a paper on a European directive, on the law in Europe. And I've asked a colleague of mine from Ohio State University to have a look at my paper. So he read it. And then he asked me, how come you haven't written not even one word about the legal situation in Israel? Well, I said, look, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of the academic boycott against Israeli academics. And then I felt ashamed that I must hide my nationality. I cannot reveal that I'm Israeli, not even when I'm writing papers about an objective subject such as I was writing about working hours. So the general public has heard about the general BDS, but few have heard about the academic BDS against Israeli scholars. So the question I'd like to raise today and explore is whether it's good or bad. Is academic BDS legitimate, or is it illegitimate? Is it legal and fair? Let's find out. The academic BDS takes several forms. There's the overt academic BDS, the open academic BDS. Look at the slide, for example. There was one Israeli scholar who sent an email to a French scholar, and she asked him, could you please send me one of your inventions? It's called a certain, I don't know, a certain dosage of something that he invented. And the French scholar would not sell her his invention. She wanted to conduct research on that invention of his, and he wouldn't sell it to her. He said, I will not sell you that because you are Israeli and I disagree with what Israel does with the Hamas. So this is an example of open or overt BDS, academic BDS. But there's another aspect of the academic BDS which is more worrisome, and that is the camouflaged boycott, camouflaged. So de facto we have boycott, but the boycotters do not tell the truth. For example, if we have an Israeli scholar who writes a paper and she sends it over to a European review, and the reviewers reject her or his paper promptly, within half an hour, without even reading it. And they come up with excuses such as, the readers of our journal will not be able to understand the complexity of your paper. So these are excuses. These are stories that they are telling for not wanting to cooperate with Israeli scholars. The third manifestation of the boycott is in the chilling effect. Israeli scholars stopped researching, like me, Israeli law or other fields of Israeli life, because if they want to publish their papers abroad and they want them to be accepted for publication abroad, they feel that they have to hide their nationality. So, for example, one lecturer told me that when she writes papers and she wants to publish them abroad, she does not use her surname, her Cohen surname. She has two surnames. She hides the fact that she's Jewish. We're talking to 2015, yes? She doesn't use her surname Cohen. And the fourth manifestation of the boycott is what I call the Matisyahu Syndrome. Matisyahu Syndrome, you've heard. Most of you have you heard about Matisyahu, the singer, the reggae singer? Well, he's not Israeli. He's a non-Israeli Jewish singer who was supposed to sing in a festival in Spain. And the organizers told him that unless he supports the BDS, goals, he will not be able to sing, to perform in Spain. So this is what worries me most, because we see that the boycott is expanding. Nowadays, it's not only Israelis that are being boycotted, but also Jewish people. And I wonder whether the academic boycott might also expand into other Jewish lectures. I don't know what awaits in the future. So let's have a short look at the history of the historic background of the academic BDS. In the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there was the Arab boycott of Israel. So if a company wanted to make business, an American company wanted to make business with an Israeli company, the Arab boycott would come to that company, to the American company, and say, if you'll do business in Israel, we will boycott you. For different reasons, the Arab boycott, that's the way it's called, did not succeed. So what's the difference between the Arab boycott and the BDS boycott? The big difference is the vocabulary. The vocabulary. Nowadays, the new Arab boycott uses human rights vocabulary. It portrays the Palestinian cause, and I'm not getting into the merits of the Palestinian cause, I'm not getting into it, but it wraps the whole issue in human rights vocabulary. So, for example, the BDS talks about Israel being racist. Okay, let's have a look into one of the claims regarding racism of the BDS. For example, you see here the picture of Omar Margouti. He lived in Israel. He did his thesis in Tel Aviv University in Israel, and he is for an academic boycott of Israel. And when he was asked, listen, but academic boycott, it infringes academic freedom and it infringes Israelis' freedom of expression. What do you think about that? He said, listen, Israelis are racist. Why? Because, and I've got to quote it because it's hard for me even to repeat the things he said, but Israelis are white, European, Jewish people. They are civilized, and they consider Palestinians as Southerners and brown and not deserving academic freedom. So Israelis are white, European, Jewish, they are civilized, and they look down at the brown Southerners, Palestinians. So we see here that they try to make an analogy between the Jews and the South African white people, and between the Palestinian and the black who lived in South Africa. Well, last time I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a brown Jewish woman, okay? Half of the Israelis are Oriental. Half of my students are Oriental. Some of them are Ethiopian. These are pictures of my students taken for my Touro Law class. Okay? And Omar Margouti knows that. He lived in Israel. So we see politics being wrapped in human rights vocabulary. But what's the aim of the BDS? The aim of the academic BDS is one secular, democratic state where Israel is now. One state, it means there will not be a Jewish state and an Arab state, but only one state. Okay, Secular, it means that it's not going to be Jewish. Okay. Democratic, well, Omar Barghouti thinks that there should be a right of return of the 5 million refugees, Arab refugees from the 1948 war, meaning that there's going to be, according to the BDS vision, a majority, an Arab majority in Israel. So the aim is to have a secular, democratic state in Israel with an Arab majority. There's, among the 20 Arab states that exist, none is democratic, okay? And this aspiration of the BDS, I don't have to tell you that it means the end of the Jewish state. There will be no more Jewish state. There will be 2 Palestinian states, one for the only Palestinians and one for Jews and Palestinians with a majority for the Palestinians. So let's look at the pros and cons of the academic BDS. Let's analyze it. Let's see whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. And I would like to start with discovering whether academic BDS is about unfair discrimination on grounds of nationality. Many states have legislation not allowing discrimination on the grounds of nationality. Look, for example, at Article 26 of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It says that all persons are equal before the law, and that the law shall prohibit any discrimination on the grounds of national origin. So let me tell you a story. I'd like to tell you the story of Professor Dan Avnon. He's an Israeli professor, and he applied for a visiting professor position in a Sydney university, the University of Sydney. Okay, he wanted to make research in Australia, fair enough, but his application was denied. Why? Why? Because he's Israeli. Professor Jake Lynch told him that he rejects his application because he wants to make a statement of disagreement with the current policies of Israel, of the Israeli government. Dr. Garassis wrote about it and said that this is the manifestation of discrimination on the grounds of nationality. People cannot choose, can hardly choose the nationality. You were born there, that's it. There's nothing you can do. A person has a choice as to doing a good thing or a bad thing. A person hardly have a choice regarding his nationality. So there's nothing the Israeli Professor Dan Avnon could have done in order to get his right of equality. So what's the cons of this argument? What do the Palestinian or the BDS supporters say against the argument of unfair discrimination? Well, one argument is that the boycott targets the Israeli institution and not the Israeli academics. Well, this is pure semantics. Professor Dan Avnon application was rejected because he's Israeli. It doesn't matter if you're boycotting an institution. At the end of the day, de facto, it's a boycott of Israelis. But I'd like to examine in more detail another argument that can be put forward in favor of the academic BDS. And the article goes like that. Israel is wrong. Israel is wrong. Israel is making very bad things, and therefore we want to make Israel a better place, a better state, so we are boycotting Israel. I don't want to get into the merits of Israel. I don't want to get into the fact that Israel is highly ranked concerning its human rights observation. I don't want to get into the fact that almost 50% of the Israeli students, or 40% of the Israeli students in Haifa University are Arabs. I want to look at the claim that Israel is wrong and therefore we are boycotting it. Let's go back to Alabama in the 50s. In the 50s, the NAACP brought a very important, or started a very important boycott against what? The bus company in Alabama. The bus company in Alabama was discriminating against blacks. So the NAACP, yes, started a boycott, a good boycott, against the bus company. So how can there be a good boycott and a bad boycott? How is it possible? Well, I can say that the Alabama bus company itself was abusive. The bus company itself mistreated black passengers. Whereas Professor Dan Avnon, look at him. He didn't do anything wrong. Contrary to the bus company, all Professor Dan Avnon wanted to do was what? Study, make research. So the academic boycott is a secondary boycott. The academic boycott is a secondary boycott. It doesn't boycott the wrongdoer. It boycotts an innocent third party. It boycotts Professor Dan Avnon so that he will pressure his government to achieve the goals of the academic BDS, which are the destruction of the State of Israel. So the academic boycott is a secondary boycott that uses Israeli scholars as a means to achieve the goals of the BDS. Judge Meltzer, the Israeli Supreme Court Judge Meltzer, called this secondary boycott collective punishment. Collective punishment. So this is the first argument against the academic BDS. Do I have? Keep going, okay. So I would like to raise a second argument against the academic BDS. And my claim is that academic BDS breaches freedom of expression. Academic BDS breaches freedom of expression. The First Amendment, and I look at Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Freedom of expression means that everyone has the right, the freedom to hold opinions without interference. Hold opinions without interference. But here with the academic BDS, we see coercion. Why do I mean that we see coercion? Because a scholar is being told that his article will not be published unless he is no longer Israeli. This is coercion. Breach of freedom also means that everyone has the right to seek and receive information. Seek and receive information. So let me tell you about a scholar who wanted, an Israeli scholar who wanted to buy a survey. Sometimes scholars buy surveys that are prepared by other scholars. And she was refused. She was refused. Why? Because she's Israeli. She was told that her achievements were not high enough, and therefore she won't be sold the survey. Half an hour later, she bought that survey for another company, and there her achievements were high enough. So this is a kind of disguised academic boycott. When I'm talking about the right to seek and receive information, I would also like to refer to your right to receive information. So imagine my well-written paper on, let's say, cyber law. You will not be able to read, to seek, and receive information about what I think about cyber law. Why? Because of academic boycott. Freedom of expression is also about imparting information, but Israeli scholars are not always allowed to publish their papers, even if they are good ones. And it's about imparting information in any media that includes legal journals, and they're not always allowed to do so. So academic BDS acts as a de facto censorship authority, a de facto censorship authority. But freedom of expression is not only about the rights of Israeli scholars. It's also about the right of, or the interest of the general public. John Stuart Mill, the great philosopher, said that without human freedom of expression, there will be no progress in science, law, or politics. No progress in science, law, or politics. Have a look at this slide. This slide is about an invention of an Israeli scholar from Tel Aviv University who had a major breakthrough regarding the research of cancer. So the BDS wants to to silence that scholar who published his paper. What will that do to our society? In other words, academic BDS is about boycotting progress. So what's the answer of the boycotters? What do they say about it? Well, they claim that they have their own freedom of expression. We can say whatever we want. We can do whatever we want. We have our own freedom of expression. This argument was rejected by many courts. For example, the Israeli court held that freedom of expression is intended to fertilize the public debate, whereas the boycotts are meant to coerce certain opinions. So the academic BDS wants to coerce its own opinion. Judge Amit held that academic boycott monopolizes the opinions market. It is the antithesis of freedom of expression. Antithesis of freedom of expression. I've put here the slide of Voltaire, who's all about freedom of expression. He said, I might disagree with your opinion, but I'm willing to give my life to your right to express it. So this is Voltaire. And Judge Amit said that Voltaire did not intend to fight for the right of the opponent to shut up his own mouth. So I could say that the boycotter's freedom of expression ends when it is used to silence my expression. The boycotter's freedom of expression ends when it is used to silence my expression when I have to go around a Jewish campus, Touro College, with two bodyguards. That's when it should end, the freedom of expression. I shouldn't receive text messages that are supposed to scare me. My computer should not be hacked into because I come to give a lecture on academic freedoms. It shouldn't be this way. I will just say that also the European Court of Justice rejected a claim of freedom of expression of a mayor who called for the boycott of Israeli products. So what can and should be done? What can be done against the academic BDS? I started with a personal story, and I would like to end with a personal story. When I was a student in England, at Essex University, I felt homesick. And what does an Israeli do when she feels homesick? I went to look for Israeli products on campus. I was looking for hummus, and I didn't find any Israeli products on campus, and I was the co-head of the Jewish Society, so I asked my co-head, Craig, how come I don't see any Israeli products on campus? And he said, there's a boycott of Israeli products on campus. And that was too much for me. Okay, no hummus and a boycott of Israeli. No way, no way. So, although this boycott was on for many years, it was a very left-wing campus. We called all the Israelis that were students at the time at that university. We called all the Jews, all the people with an open mind, and we managed to pass a resolution condemning the boycott on Israeli campus in Essex University. So, can I ask you to stop? I think the term is coach activism. Coach activism. You don't know that. So can I ask you to be active? Can I ask you to stop the boycott of intellectuality, to raise your voice, and to take a stance for justice, for freedom of expression, for academic freedom? If you do that, it will be great. Thank you. I am open for questions if I have time. I don't know, Roger, you're the boss.
Hardly. We do have time for questions, about 15 minutes. This is being recorded for the law school's YouTube channel. So if you do have a question, let me know, and I'll bring the mic over to you. And that way, it will also be part of the presentation being videotaped or recorded as well. Does anyone have any questions?
I convinced them, you know.
Well, I do, or Marianne does. And I'll bring it back to Ken.
I'd like you to expand a little bit on your thought that the BDS and the boycott movement is not really similar to the disinvestment and boycott movement in South Africa. Both of them claim to be movements that were intended to affect, because of racism, intended to affect the opportunity or the chance of ordinary people to try to make some effect upon their government. And your position, as I understand it, is that they're completely different. So I'd like you to, if you can expand on it a bit.
First of all, there's complete academic freedom in Israel. Before the '67 war, there were no universities, as far as I know, in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria. After '67 war, there are about dozens of universities there. In addition, Arabs do not suffer from racism in Israel. Israel is a democratic state. I have Arab students, I have Arab colleagues. One of my colleagues teaches with me cyber law. So they are not discriminated against. They try to portray, they try to make an analogy between Israeli whites and South African whites, but it's all different. Israeli Arabs enjoy the right to vote. They participate in the democratic process. So it's definitely not the same thing. And when you shut up the mouth of Professor Dan Avnon, you shut up intellectuality. You shut up progress. Israel is the startup nation, you know that. Israel is one of the nations with the highest number of patents in the world. Are we going to close the doors of Israeli academia? Not even the boycotters think that. Omar Barghouti was a student in Tel Aviv University while he was advocating for academic boycott of Israel. My Arab colleagues, my Arab students, they are afraid, most of them are afraid to raise their voice. I prepared a certain video clip about my teaching in the university, and I asked some of my students who are Zionists, would you mind appearing in this videotape? And they said no. That would endanger their lives. Appearing in an apolitical video clip about Israel would endanger the life of an Arab student. This is undemocratic in my view.
Ken?
Two questions. I'm sorry. I'm taking advantage. Two questions.
Go ahead.
Number one, how does BDS do its work? Does it call, send letters, communicate? I know they have a website. How does BDS reach the various academic institutions to threaten, persuade, or discourage them from allowing access to Israeli scholars? That's question one. Question two, the Spanish Music Festival eventually backed down, I understand, and allowed Matisyahu to perform. Is there any lesson for people who oppose the boycott from what happened to get the Spanish Music Festival to back down and permit Matisyahu to perform?
Thank you for those questions, Ken. How does the BDS manage to get his message crossed? First of all, money. We're talking about huge amounts of money coming from European states to NGOs, to European NGOs, and then on to the boycotters, boycotting groups. Huge amounts of money. Secondly, we're talking about the campuses. You might even know better than I do that most American campuses have BDS week, apartheid month. Okay. I believe that these BDS week, this apartheid month, breach students and scholars' academic freedom. Why do I say that apartheid month breaches academic freedom? Well, the great philosopher, legal philosopher, Ronald Dworkin said that academic freedom is about insulating universities from governments, universities from political organizations. It's about insulating, distinguishing between academic life and politics and money and government. The BDS managed to enter academic life. And maybe I have her slide. No, here she is. Hang on. This is Professorvada Millboro, the one with the jeans shirt. She was a visiting professor to a New York City University, and she entered one of the conferences room where the student union tried to pass a resolution supporting BDS, academic BDS, or BDS in general. And she said that, I'd like to read it out for you. She said, for the first, she's very left-wing Israeli activist. For the first time in my life, I experienced something close to how and what a Jewish professor must have felt in Germany in the 30s of the last century. My hands were shaking and my body ached. All of a sudden, I became part of an ostracized mass which was negatively marked. Her hands were shaking. She was so afraid. In Israel, we are not used to being looked at differently. And then suddenly she felt like a Jewish professor in the 1930s of the last century. Remember, the Holocaust started in universities. The first to be fired from their position were the university professors. In my view, Kristallnacht was about, this is my personal view, Kristallnacht was about burning the books of Jewish authors. And here we're seeing papers of Jewish writers, Israeli Jewish writers, not being published. This is my own personal, I'm the head of the iPhone organization, but this is my own personal, and I came. This is my own personal view. As to your second question, what can be done? Stand up and fight for justice. Each and every one of you, if you are for freedom of expression, freedom of thought, justice, equality, it's about time the BDS receives an answer like Matisyahu. Matisyahu now gets invited to many more concerts. People who didn't know him now know him and inviting over. So we shouldn't be afraid. We should fight back for justice.
Any other questions? I have one, just one. And during your remarks, I think in the last 10 minutes or so of your presentation, you mentioned I think it was a decision by the Israeli Supreme Court, and then very quickly, was it the European Court of Justice?
European Court of Human Rights.
Court of Human Rights, excuse me. And Can you say a little bit more about those cases in that how were they presented or how were they litigated? What did they involve? Because from what we've been talking about so far in the last hour, I understand BDS to be an extraordinary or political movement, and yet there are ways in which there have been, if I understand correctly, court cases, that is,
Okay.
legal cases.
I told you I'm saving the legal stuff for tomorrow, but I'll talk about the European Court of Human Rights decision. So we have a mayor, a French mayor for the Communist Party, and he was in a council of his municipality, and he said that he intends to call the workers of his municipality to boycott Israeli products. So he wanted to boycott Israeli products in his community, in his city. And the Jewish community of that municipality complained to the police. And the police brought charges against that mayor for breach of equality, for discrimination on the basis of nationality and on the basis of race. And he was brought to court and he was convicted and he appealed to the European Court of Human Rights. And he said, listen, I'm a mayor, I'm a politician, these charges breach my freedom of expression. And the European Court of Human Rights rejected this claim. It says that his activity discriminated against the manufacturers of Israeli products. So we see here that the European Court of Human Rights gave more importance to the right of equality, to the right of indiscrimination, than to the right of freedom of expression of a politician.
It's almost 1:30, so if people have to leave for class or to teach a class, you should do that. On the other hand, we have a little bit of time, so we can continue the conversation without the microphones. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You've been a great audience. Thanks.